Now, Muhammad, he was shyer than a veiled virgin girl. That's what the Hadith tells us, and there are lots of other pearls. This shy guy, he raped and killed and wanted his critics dead. When they were killed, he didn't mourn, he celebrated instead. This is the guy they want you to think is God's most perfect man. If you believe that, then you'll also believe that I am Tarzan. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to This Week in Jihad with the great David Wood. Hello, David.
Hello, Robert. Good to be here with the poet laureate of the entire world right now. We look back to the great times and we're like, Alfred Lord Tennyson with the Charge of the Light Brigade. And you got this guy with his poem Horatius. And we had Robert Frost and T.S. Eliot. And what do we have now? We got Robert Spencer, the greatest who ever did it, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, we're in trouble now, ladies and gentlemen. It's just part of the decline of civilization, but that's for another show. This show is about another kind of declining civilization, Islam and Jihad. And in its death throes, it is dangerous, just like a wounded snake. So, and didn't Muhammad say something like that? That it's going to go back to its hole like a snake?
Yep.
There you go. So
it's funny.
we are.
By the way, what's interesting about that? Because you got all these hadiths, and it sounds like Islam's going to conquer the world, and then you got these other hadiths where Islam's going to be so weak it just crawls back into the hole like a snake.
Mhm.
It's like you have all these hadiths that say like every possible scenario of something that could happen.
I happen to have a book about that.
Yeah, I know. And but it's funny because. So no matter what happens, Muslims can always point to a hadith. If Islam grows rapidly, they say, you see, just like you said. And if it shrivels up and crawls back into its hole, they'll say, you see, it's exactly as Muhammad said.
Yep.
No matter what happens, no matter what happens. Why? Because they were making up hadiths when Islam was in a bunch of different situations in the world.
So, David, I got to send you a copy because I actually only have, I think, one left. I got to get some more. But,
give it to me.
I only have, I got to send you one because we have to have our Titanic debate. The Muslim propagandists will all see, wow, rational people debating. It's a whole new concept.
I already have my reading schedule laid out for the next several months of various things that I had agreed to review and comment on and stuff like that. So the debate would have to be at least a few months down the road. However, you've got a new book, so we might want to do like a live stream on my show, on my channel here in the very near future, like maybe next week or something, where you basically run down. I'll ask you some questions and stuff about it, but you basically lay out the thesis of your book and some of your arguments and go through some of your points. We can tell people where to get it and so on. And then a few months down the road, we'll have our debate where you'll be humiliated. But at least by then, people will have bought the book before they realize that it's been thoroughly crushed by me.
Okay, well, that sounds like a deal. That sounds like the best deal since the angel Seraphel appeared to Kutam. So, we got lots of jihad here, ladies and gentlemen. And so, I thought that we should start off with a story. Now, see, I have this problem again of organization, of where to find, once I get all the stories together. I spend a couple hours every Wednesday morning getting all the stories together, but then I can't find them because there's so many.
I've seen your browser with the tabs. Like if you just have a couple tabs open, you can still see what they are. If you have 50 tabs open, you can't tell what anything is without clicking on it.
Okay, and that's a perfectly reasonable point. But what's the alternative? If I want to set aside 50 stories to talk to you about, then I can either open 50 windows or have 50 tabs. Either way, it's going to end up being hard to find.
Mm-hmm. That is a problem.
So it's just an ongoing mystery for me.
And if you're asking me about tech stuff, you're asking the wrong guy. But someone who knows a way of organizing massive amounts of stuff for purposes of live stream. Explain a better way in the comments section afterwards.
Yeah.
And Robert, then you could check it out afterwards.
And speaking of comments, I have this one here from John Wilson. I pre-ordered my copy of Muhammad, a critical biography. Still waiting for it to arrive. That's because it's not quite out yet. I got some advance copies because that's what they do. They send the author 10 10 copies, and they're almost all gone, but I got to get one to David so that he can humiliate me later. And and anyway, they're going to start shipping on the 10th, so that is 6 days from now. You should get it soon after that. In the meantime, I found our man here. This is Joshua Robles. And I don't know if you've heard of Joshua Robles.
Only from your tweet.
Oh, yeah. Well, Joshua converted to Islam a few years
Good.
back, and
Good.
probably everybody around him congratulated themselves on how they were not Islamophobic and so on.
Mm-hmm.
He
Yep.
is a young man in Las Vegas, and he looks a little, people were saying he looks older, but I don't really necessarily think so. He just has facial hair. He's 16, according to the cops, and he was plotting to carry out jihad attacks in the Las Vegas area. And he's pretty hardcore. He was jailed for this plan to carry out an ISIS attack in Las Vegas, okay? And they thought that he was so dangerous that the prosecutors asked that he get $1 million bail. And the judge, one of these judges, David, said, "Oh no, the poor thing, $1 million, that's way too much. Let's make it 10,000."
Oh, good idea.
And so they decided to make the bail 10,000, but then they found in his jail cell that he had handwritten an ISIS flag and had written on it "Death to Jews" and "Welcome with death."
Well,
So,
and you know what the government did then? Well, let this guy out for free. Well, we'll release this guy on his own personal recognizance there, because he hates Jews.
yep. And so they actually, to their credit, in this one case, they actually did raise the bail to $1 million, and so he is still in jail, old Joshua Robles. But he is a convert to Islam. Muslim parents don't name their children Joshua. So what is this all about, David? Why is it that so many converts to Islam seem to get the idea they ought to go jihad?
Yeah. Well, people like you and I have said for years that they convert to Islam. They believe whatever lies are being told to them by the online Dawah crew, who tell them, "Hey, you should convert to Islam because of the amazing scientific miracles, because of the miraculous preservation, because of this and that." They don't bother to research it. They assume these recruiters are telling them the truth. They convert to Islam, and then they find out, oh, if you really want to get in good with Allah, then you have to go violently subjugate the entire world. Then they do it, and everyone, it becomes a complete mystery to them.
Yeah.
This person must have some mental problem that just suddenly kicks in right when they convert to Islam.
Yep. And it happens again and again and again. There's an ongoing phenomenon that we have documented extensively in this program, and you can read more about it at jihadwatch.org, that many, many converts to Islam go jihad, and yet nowhere do authorities care. Nowhere are they studying this phenomenon. David, I got another question from the comments here. Guys, you don't do super chats? Why don't we do super chats on this channel?
Yeah, because Robert exposes jihad, his channel cannot be monetized. That's something you're not allowed to do. So you can support him in other ways. One, you could definitely buy his books, not just his new one. I can't comment on that. It may be the worst book ever. Although I have to say, Robert has a pretty darn good track record of putting out really good books. But everyone who's interested in watching this right now definitely needs the history of jihad and the critical Quran, and of course Robert's new book. So anyway, you can help out Robert, support his work by buying his books, and you can he's got a page on Patreon. You can support him on Patreon. So that's just what you have to do if YouTube won't allow you to have super chats and so on.
So we can't have fun with super chats here. I apologize for that. Complain to YouTube. I don't know. Would that help, David, if people started writing to YouTube and said, "Hey, ease up on this guy. He's not a terrible person."
No, but you might be blacklisted for stuff like in the past. You know what I mean? Like you might be on a list, just like don't ever monetize this guy, even though they might be okay with that. Because I mean, me and AP talk about Jihad all the time, and
Hmm.
we're not banned anymore. So I don't know if they've changed. You might want to just make a new channel or something like that. Or we could always try Rumble. That might be fun.
It's worth a try.
Mhm.
I think it's probably because of the Southern Poverty Law Center list and because of being banned in Britain. And those things, of course, also came from telling the truth about jihad that they don't want known. And speaking of telling the truth about jihad that they don't want known, interesting thing happened out of Facebook today, just today, and this was the Meta company that runs Facebook. They have been deliberating about this for weeks, and they just made the decision, David. They decided that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is not hate speech and will
Mhm.
not be penalized. So I'm sure you're going to go right onto your Facebook account and write about this, are you not?
I don't have a Facebook account.
And why is that?
This was several years ago, but they started banning almost everything I would post. I would say I would just take a screenshot of a death threat from a Muslim, and I would say, "Look at what this guy posted to me," and they would ban me for hate speech for reporting what the other guy said. This guy threatened my life. I would share it, and they would ban me. One time, there's this famous picture of that guy who was at like a shipyard when in World War II when the Nazis showed up and they told everyone to salute, and he just sits there with his arms
Yeah,
crossed. He refuses. Everyone around him is doing the salute except this one guy who's just looking like he's not interested in being there. Anyway, I posted a picture. I had a circle around that, and I said, "Be this guy." Right?
yep,
Be the guy who wouldn't salute. They banned me for hate speech for that. I mean, they didn't ban me off the
yeah.
platform, but they put me in their little prison where you have to wait 7 days or whatever it was. Anyway, I just got to the point where I was like, why am I doing this? I can do other things.
Yeah.
And so I got off.
And so, in other words, opposing jihad got you harassed so much on Facebook that eventually you gave up. Whereas this frankly genocidal chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
Yep. And we all know what that means. There have been attempts by people in America, politicians and so on, in America to say, "Oh no, it's just calling for freedom for all people." No, it's not. We know what that means. It means completely wiping Israel off the map. We know what that means.
Yep, we certainly do, but Facebook doesn't care. Facebook is much more concerned. I actually had the same experience as you did, David. I hung out on Facebook as long as I could, but ultimately they were flagging everything. I was getting banned all the time. And one time, the son of Ramazan Kadyrov, the Chechen strongman, beat up a guy who was already in prison for desecrating the Quran. And Ramazan Kadyrov's son went into the prison and started beating this guy bloody. And it was a video that was widely circulated on Twitter. So I put it up at Jihad Watch with a still photo from the video of the one guy hitting the other. It was just, that's it, one guy hitting another. And it was banned for pornography. And I thought, yeah, see, he was wearing short sleeves, so you could see his whole arm.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. It's that a lot of these platforms will make rules that seem reasonable, but at the end of the day, it's people who are enforcing these rules, and the
Hmm.
people will apply them to anything. So they'll make a rule, no pornography. Say, oh, that's a good rule, but then they'll say, oh, this person, I'll just say it's pornography just so I can ban this guy.
Hmm.
So in other words, you have a team of people who are controlling the content, and they really love jihad. They really love jihad, and they do not like anyone exposing jihad. So crap
Yeah,
platform.
I was thinking that it was likely that I was getting reported for every last possible thing you could report people for under any pretext. So somebody just decided to say that this image of this short-sleeved individual was pornographic, and that was that. Anyway, I'm not there anymore, and you
Hey,
shouldn't be either. Yes.
hey, you should go back on and post a picture of Muhammad Hijab after he pulled off his shirt for everyone, and see if that gets banned for being porn. And that would be funny. You say
Uh,
Muhammad Hijab is now a porn star.
Yes. Well, that's probably something he would have no trouble being. He'd be very happy to do. Anyway, we have very somber news out of Nigeria. A summary piece, a survey indicated that not only has there been all the violent jihad that we have documented for so long here, but also so many people have been displaced that now, according to Open Doors, the organization that works to protect persecuted Christians, 16 million, no fewer than 16,200,000 Christians have been forcibly driven from their homes by Islamic jihadis and are now in displaced person camps in Nigeria and in the surrounding nations. Now, why, David, would jihadis want to drive people from their homes?
Um, Islam wants to keep expanding. Nigeria is right on the line. There's actually a name for the line. I forget what it's called, but people who actually do the research, there's a line that basically goes around the Muslim world that separates it from the non-Muslim world. In other words, it's not an official line. It's like an imaginary line, but there's basically Muslim majority on one side of the line, some other Hindu majority or Christian majority or something on the other side of the line. And Islam just wants to keep on pushing people farther and farther back, making people leave their homes and so on, keep pushing it back until you push through the entire country over the period of 50 years or 100 years or however long it takes. But they got the long-term goal in mind.
And that's what happened to every country you can name that's majority Muslim. There were invading armies. They took over an area, they took over another area, they carried out ethnic cleansing or the subjugation under the dhimmi laws of the native population until ultimately there was a tiny minority of non Muslims left. Most of them had been driven out or forcibly converted, and now we have the Islamic world, and they're still at it to create more of it. So, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Central Africa, interesting story out of there, David. The Allied Democratic Forces, which is a very benign name for an Islamic State ISIS group in the northeast of the Democratic Republic of Congo, in North Kivu, they struck there, and it's interesting to note that one of the survivors said this: it was chaos, people screaming and trying to escape. Those who did not survive were killed, and the rebels could utter the word Bismillah while killing our innocent Christians. Now, why on earth would they utter Bismillah in the name of Allah while they're committing murder? They must be misunderstanding Islam, surely, in this case.
Well, it's called fighting in the way of Allah. So you want to make it clear, especially since every Western journalist is hell bent on saying, "Oh, it's some other reason they're fighting. It's because of some other cause. It has to be something else." These guys get frustrated. It's like, how can we make our point any clearer? Why do you think we scream Allahu Akbar while we're killing people? So you guys can't misrepresent it and say it's over something else. We want, in other words, from a Western perspective, it's like the worst possible motive you could have for going around killing people would be doing it for your gut. Whereas for them, it's the greatest possible motive, and so they want to make it crystal clear that they're doing this for their God, and that's what happens.
Indeed. And so, even though they make it clear, this will still not be reported in the establishment media. My source on this story is International Christian Concern, which is a very good group that tracks the persecution of Christians. But they report this sort of thing. When the massacre was reported, which it got very scant reporting in the establishment media, it was not mentioned that they were saying Bismillah while they were killing people. In Burkina Faso, 100 Christians have been killed in the last 6 months, and 3 months, I'm sorry. And in one particularly dreadful incident just last Sunday, they captured 26 Christians in Sanaba, in the western part of Burkina Faso, and took them to a church where they cut their throats.
Hmm.
Now, what is that all about? Surely this must be some kind of extremist Islam that's hijacking the real thing, no?
Yeah, I would. I'm just gonna have to say, yeah, total insane extremist stuff.
They took them to the church most likely to emphasize that they believe that the church is a center of shirk, that is, association of partners with Allah, and then that would justify their killing them, as they have been commanded to fight against those whose religion is not all for Allah. So,
Well, there's that too.
oh yeah. Oh, I got a story here out of New Jersey. This guy, this imam here. What's his name? Let me get his name here. Imam Khalil Adem, out of Flanders, New Jersey. Flanders. Where's Flanders? I don't know. I've never been there. But the one thing I can tell you about this guy, he's preaching Friday sermon at the Islamic Society of North Jersey, and he says, I don't, anyway, he says, I somehow don't think he has the New Jersey accent. He says that we know the aggression, he's talking about the Jews, that they have come with, and we know their downfall. We know the verses, that is, of the Quran, and Allah says they will be destroyed in the end. At the end, their time will come, and the Muslims will be the ones to do it. What do you think? Surely this must be extremist.
No, because it's a Muslim. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well,
It's like
where
it's
does
like
it get this idea?
you. It's got to be
That's
you,
it,
right?
man. It's got to be.
That's where all these guys go to get their ideas, right? I mean, think. You say, here's what they believe, and then they believe it. So obviously they got it from you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, that's actually what they tell you in the
I know.
the Islamophobia manuals and so on. That it's very common. It goes back years.
Mhm.
The Imam says something, we quote it. It's fine when the Imam says it, but when we quote it, then it's Islamophobia. So it's no doubt an act of Islamophobia that I'm saying this to you right now, that this Imam said this in Jersey.
Mhm.
But what is he referring to? Can you illuminate it all? They will be destroyed in the end. At the end, their time will come, and the Muslims will be the ones to do it.
I mean, you have again. I mentioned earlier that you have apart from the little hadith where Islam's going to crawl back into its hole like the snake that it is, like the slithery snake that it is. You have all these predictions about Islam taking over the world and all religion will be for Allah. And Muhammad said, I've been shown the east of the east and the west of the west, and I have seen that Islam rules over all of it. So this is a prophecy. With the Jews, they are Muslims are told that they're going to fight the Jews, and until the Jews are hiding behind rocks and trees, and the rocks and trees are crying out, "Hey, Muslim! There's a Jew behind me! Come kill him!" and so on. And so this is all built into Islam, and somehow, when someone says it, "Hey, we're going to conquer these people. We're going to subjugate these people," everyone's shocked. Where's he getting this extremism from? His prophet?
Yep, that couldn't be it. Nope.
His God?
But that's it. The Hadith says the rocks and the trees are going to cry out. The stones will cry out and say that there's a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him. So the Muslims are going to be the ones to do away with the Jews at the end of the world. This is something that is in canonical Hadiths. But David, this is all very Islamophobic, and this is a UK Secretary of State. The UK has several Secretaries of State, I understand, for different things. And this one, I don't know her name. If anybody knows her name, please put it in the chat or let me know somehow so that I can start to try to find out more about her. But it's interesting that this week the UK government is working to criminalize Islamophobia.
Well, that's
And
good.
so, yeah,
About time.
finally.
About time. About time.
Exactly. So this guy stands up in Parliament and he says, would you please be so kind as to give us a definition of Islamophobia?
No
And
chance.
the Secretary of State stood up and she said, actually, we're working on this and we're working on it
Ah,
quite assiduously. But she never did get around to giving an actual uh, definition. So I see that this is Angela Rayner, and she
yeah.
is she doesn't know what Islamophobia is, but she is working to criminalize it. And so it's a good thing that she's going to take care of that for us.
That is funny because I mean, you said, and she was asked, and I was like, no chance. It's like you can't say here's what Islamophobia is, because if you said it in any sane sense, in other words, if you were making any sane rule against what you're calling Islamophobia, it would have to be something like, if you're in a constant state of panic because you think that Muslims are hiding behind everything and they're coming to sabotage you, and anything that goes wrong in your life, you're thinking, oh, it must be Muslims behind the scenes and so on. If you wanted to say that's a problem, then you can make it. But that's never how they apply it. They say, "Oh,
Yeah.
you criticized Muhammad for ordering his followers to kill apostates. Oh, you criticized Muhammad for having sex with a prepubescent 9-year-old girl. Oh, you made fun of Muhammad for taking the wife of his own adopted son. Oh, you criticize Islam because it calls for your violent subjugation and the annihilation of Jews and the destruction of your societies, and you actually have the gall to respond to it. The Quran calls Jews and Christians the worst of creatures, and some of you actually have the nerve to say that it's wrong. This is Islamophobia. That's how Islamophobia actually gets applied in the real world.
Hmm.
But if you were to say that, if you were to say, well, Islamophobia is anytime you criticize Islam for killing apostates, child marriage, any of that stuff, you cannot be allowed to say that. They would sound like complete lunatics, and she knows it. So the question is, how do you phrase it in some way that can actually make it through and get passed into law, even though you want to apply it in a completely insane fashion to get more people locked up and to get more child molesters and rapists and so on out of prison, let them go, let the jihadis go, all the people you locked up for supporting ISIS, let them go, and replace them with people who criticize ISIS and Islam and all these things.
That's really what it's about, because actually it's a trick. Islamophobia is a trick. It's a sleight of hand. What it's sold to the public as is, we're going to protect Muslims from vigilante attacks. We're going to
Mhm.
protect them on the streets from being attacked by far right, white supremacists, right wing extremists, all that nonsense. And that's great. Nobody objects to that. Nobody has any problem with protecting people, innocent people, from being attacked by vigilantes or thugs or creeps or whatever. But once it's sold to the public in that way, then it becomes exactly what David is saying here. It becomes a vehicle to silence any negative word about Islam, any opposition to jihad violence, any opposition to Sharia oppression. It's all gone under the guise of protecting Muslims from attacks.
Mhm.
All right, interesting story out of Germany. In Zehlendorf, der Führer was very popular in Zehlendorf. And now there are his sons and children and heirs, but they are not Germans, they're Arabs. In any case, what we have in Zehlendorf, Nurhan B, they never give the last name, he attacked his ex-girlfriend on the sidewalk in front of her house. He ambushed her and he fatally stabbed her to death. And interesting thing, David, about this, he did not scream Allahu Akbar, but he was screaming something during the attack. Now, it's noteworthy. It's not even, by the Quran of Mecca that there was a little bit of a fad for in France. It was something completely new. And so I'll just tell you because there's no point
There's
in
no way I
guessing
would
when
know.
it
Mhm.
could be anything. Yeah. He says, I have the right to do this. And that's what he was screaming as he stabs his ex to death on the sidewalk in Zettlendorf. Did he have the right to do it?
Um, there are a number of ways you could argue that. Um, so you could put her in the apostate category, the unbeliever category, anything you want to argue. You can come up with an Islamic justification for stabbing someone.
Yeah, the story actually out of the German press here. It's the Berliner Zeitung. They say it's an honor killing, that he killed her to restore his honor because he was enraged that she
Hmm.
had left him. And certainly there is abundant precedent for that, is there not?
Hmm. Yeah, and you know, we've talked about this before, but honor killings there were that was a cultural issue even before Islam, but Islam just made it defensible. It made it more defensible by making it this horrible thing that if a woman is disobeying a man or a daughter is disobeying her parents or you can there are always Islamic penalties. If your wife is disobedient, you can always beat her and so on.
Mhm.
But if you want to, you can say, hey, you're not following this rule, this rule, this rule. Surah 4 verse 65 says that if you don't fully submit to all of Muhammad's decisions, you're not a Muslim. So I say you're not a Muslim. Or if you're just an unbeliever, then you can strike at their neck. So there are always all kinds of justifications
Yes,
for this. And at the end of the day, you can always make something up. Say, she tore up a Quran, so I brutally murdered her in the name of Allah. And plenty of justifications for violence in Islam.
that would certainly fly in an Islamic country.
Hmm.
For example, I got another story out of Iran. 17-year-old girl killed by her father in the province of Ilam. And the human rights organization in Iran says it was an honor killing. The girl was named Bobina Zainevand, and she was from Gorzalnagar village in the Majin district of Darusher city. Her father apparently shot her with a shotgun in order to restore the family honor because she had been in a relationship with a boy of whom he did not approve.
Hmm. And so instead of talking to the girl and taking steps to make sure she understands what her obligations are and so on, just blow her away with a shotgun.
Mhm. And the question will be now, will we see the Islamic Republic prosecute this man for murder, or will he get off? Because in all too many Islamic countries, there are reduced penalties and sometimes no penalties at all for honor killings.
And Armin Navabi, he's a ex-Muslim atheist, but
Hmm.
he's really knows his stuff on Iran. He's pointed out that you have the population, the broader population that is turned against the religious rulers and so on. He says basically the only group that still supports the current regime is like the hardline Muslims, the really hardcore Muslims who are still, obsessed with the Mahdi and subjugating the world and all this stuff. And they're actually trying to bring about the the return of the caliph and I mean
Hmm.
the 12th imam and so on. They're trying to bring all this about. So those are the kind of the last group that's really strongly supports the regime, but those are the exact kind of guys who would support honor killing. So you can't really come against some of these things that we think of as extreme. You can't come against them when the only guys who are supporting you anymore are the extremists.
Exactly. Very interesting dilemma they've got there. Uh, and it's only going to get worse as the regime continues to erode its own support by striking terror in its own population, because that's the only weapon it's got to try to control the protests. The Quran says, strike terror in the enemies of Allah. But the more they do it, the more they make people hate the regime. So it's a vicious circle. All right, back to Germany. We got a story out of Waltershausen. in Thuringia, we have a Somali who entered a supermarket, and he was apparently looking for trouble. He started to cough on people and irritate them, annoying them. And some guy asked him to stop. And when he asked him to stop, the cougher grew enraged, pulled a knife, and he stabbed him. Where did he stab him, David?
I'll go with neck for 200.
Neck for 200 it is. And
Shocker.
he then threatened others there, threatened other customers, and injured another man slightly in with his knife, said, "I will kill you and your families." And he's looking at 15 years prison, and after that he'll be fine. Am I right? He'll become a loyal, stable, productive member of German society.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
After all those years of prison dawa and yep.
Yep. And meanwhile, we have in Munich, we have a group of Afghan migrants, and they call themselves the Kings of Munich. And it's very interesting because they are threatening to cut off the heads of enemies of Islam. And a TV station recently went in to this area and they started interviewing these guys. And they said, hey, because they're Afghans, what do you think of the Taliban? Because these are people who supposedly fled to Germany to get refuge from the Taliban, okay? So they flee, and they're in Germany. The TV guy asks them, what do you think of the Taliban? The guy says, the Islamic Emirate of the Taliban is definitely better. There's no more war, no more theft, nothing. If thieves are caught, their hands are cut off. And so the TV interviewer, who was no mean intellect, he said, well, then why did you come to Germany?
Mm-hmm.
If you like the
Good
Taliban.
question.
and he says they said they came to Germany for Islamic reasons. I'm sorry, for economic reasons. Excuse me, economic reasons. But then one of them says, if Germany becomes and remains Islamic, then everything will be very good.
Mm-hmm. It sure will. Just like in Afghanistan and Pakistan and all these other Sharia compliant hellholes that everyone wants to flee. Isn't that crazy though? Because these guys saying economic reasons. When they were seeking asylum or whatever, they were, oh, please save us from the Taliban. They're going to kill us all because we support the West so much. We're not safe here. They're going to kill us. And Western nations, oh, okay, bring them here. Yes, bring these poor suffering souls here. And they get here, ha ha, we're going to take over here. We love the Taliban. It's great, and we need to make Germany the Taliban.
That's it.
And people never learn.
Germany is well on its way. And because they're not learning, they just call anybody who opposes them Nazis, and they just keep going.
And again, we've talked about this before, but that was Hitler's ultimate dream. He believed that the people of Germany were racially superior to everyone else, and they were totally capable of conquering the world, but they had the wrong ideology. They had Christianity, which doesn't encourage conquering. And so Hitler lamented, why didn't we have the religion of the Muslims? If we'd combine our race, which he viewed as racially inferior. He viewed the Arabs as racially inferior, but he viewed their ideology as the correct ideology as far as this is what will subjugate the world. The reason they hadn't is because they had an inferior race, according to him. So he said, if you combine the German race, the German people, with that ideology, it will dominate the entire world. Didn't happen in his lifetime, but it's happening in ours, Robert.
Yep. I see the vogue that Hitler is enjoying on Twitter. And of course, all the Muslims love that because they loved Hitler from the start with the Mufti of Jerusalem living in Berlin and working for the Nazis during World War II. And he made broadcasts in Arabic trying to recruit people into supporting the Germans. So maybe we will see what Hitler thought was going to happen. Anyway, meanwhile, there is Islamization going on all over the place. And we had an interesting story out of Sweden, Uddevalla in Sweden. And this is a place where the Sweden Democrats, rather, not the Social Democrats, the Sweden Democrats have political power. And so the Sweden Democrats, for those of you who do not know, they are an Islam aware party. They are against mass Muslim migration into Sweden. And so they are vilified as far right and have been shunned by all the major parties. But their political power continues to grow because the more Sweden slides into chaos, the more people see, oh, the Sweden Democrats were right all along. So, anyway, in Uddevalla, they have a majority, and it turned out that there was a problem, a minor problem. The children were not eating the school lunches. And so they thought, what we need is more good old Swedish home cooking.
Mm.
That is, instead of serving hamburger, oh, I don't even know what they were serving. I don't know. Maybe it was falafel or.
Swedish meatballs?
Well, that's what they want, because they're Swedish. So they were putting more Swedish stuff into the canteens, and it turned out a lot of that is pork because that's traditional food in Sweden. And so Mohammed, a high school student in Agneberg School, he says, it feels like those who are non-religious or Christian are given more priority, and that we Muslims are being forgotten, and that also leads to exclusion.
Yeah. Isn't it funny? They always start sounding like leftists when they make their appeals. You don't want this doesn't seem very diverse.
Yep.
Aren't we all about diversity here? That's what Islam's all about until we take over. But that's what, yeah, we love diversity right for the moment.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So Sweden is now, they're enraged, that the pork is being served in the schools as if that's the only thing, which it isn't. And so they are agitating that pork be banned from the Swedish schools. And I think the way Sweden's going, it's likely that they're going to get that wish fairly soon. But right now in Uddevalla, you can get pork products in the schools, and people are not happy. Meanwhile, in Turkey, in Diyarbakir, in eastern Turkey, there was a big brawl in a cafe. And this is a screenshot from a video of the brawl. See people fighting outside, and there are a couple of cops. Actually, this cop looks pretty useless. He's just standing there while these guys are fighting and looking at his fellow police officer. I'm sorry, I realize that you can't see what I'm pointing at, but if you look at the guy by the car, there's a policeman in front of the car, and he's standing there kind of idly, and then two guys right in front of him fighting, and another police officer over to the left. Anyway, this was a big fight in a cafe because, David, they were selling alcohol. And they were serving women who were not wearing hijab. And so a group of Muslims, and what were they yelling?
Allahu Akbar.
How did you know that? You must have seen this story.
Nope. Haven't at all. Just a wild, crazy guess.
It's wild, clairvoyant powers that you've got. It's astonishing, really, that you would know. But in any case, yes, that's what they were yelling, and they smashed up the place because they were enraged that alcohol was being sold and that women who were unveiled were being served. And so I think that's the kind of thing Sweden can look forward to. That right now they're whining and sounding like leftists and saying, we're being left out. But after a while, they start to hit. That's what it always comes out to, does it not?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I mean, it all, in spite of what you say in your book, according to Muslim sources, this all goes back to Muhammad's methodology. When you're completely outnumbered, hey guys, peace and tolerance, man, peace and tolerance. That's what I'm all about. And then once your numbers grow, the approach changes. And once your numbers grow even more, the approach changes again. It's always about what's in the best interest of the ummah. If screaming, hey, but what about diversity is in the best interest, that's what you scream. If screaming Allahu Akbar while slaughtering people in the name of Allah is in the best interest of the ummah, that's what you do. That's
in the book. What do you mean, despite what I write in the book?
I'm saying because you probably don't believe that this stuff actually happened. That's why I clarified that. According, it's still in the sources. So.
It's in the sources, yes.
Yep.
But did the sources actually happen? Nah. Anyway, just wait till our Titanic Clash of the Titans debate. All right, we have in back to Germany. Got to find the guy here. This is an imam, and he is talking to a group of school children in Stadt Tallendorf in Hesse. And he is, you can see they are not Muslim school children because you got all
Uh-huh.
those girls, they are not wearing hijabs. And he
Yeah,
is,
just don't try to think about what he's thinking about.
that's correct. But what he's
Hmm.
reciting is the Fatiha,
Hmm.
the first surah of the Quran. Now, why would it be foolish for the Germans to allow an imam to come into a school and recite the Fatiha?
Well, as you and I know, when at the end of Surat Al-Fatiha, so for everyone who's not, that's the first surah of the Quran. Muslims recite it 17 times per day. But in there's a little place where it refers to Jews and Christians, where Muslims actually pray, don't make us like those upon whom is wrath, or like those who have gone astray. But when you look up what those phrases referred to, those upon whom is wrath, that's how that was their code for Jews, and those who went astray, that refers to the Christians. And so you can recite these prayers in front of a Christian audience, and if they do not know what these things refer to, because they're ignorant of what's in the Muslim sources, then imams can actually get away, and in many cases even get Christians to recite this prayer, which is saying, please don't make us evil, disgusting Christians or Jews.
Indeed. And so it's kind of crazy, but so much of this is. And so I wanted to show, yep.
I'm surprised with all those little girls there, he wasn't quoting Surah 65 verse 4 to them.
Yikes. Surah 65, verse 4 is directions for how you go about getting a divorce. You have to wait, make sure the girl's not pregnant, but then the verse stipulates this holds true. You have to wait anyway, even for girls who have not menstruated.
Prepubescent.
In
Hmm.
other words, they are prepubescent girls you're divorcing. You've already married them, you're
Hmm.
divorcing them. The flip side of this story comes out of Pakistan, and this is the Council on Islamic Ideology. And there they are at one of their meetings. And I'm sorry, I'd love to attend, really. It would, and they even have a chair for us. We could both go. Um, but the Council of Islamic Ideology, they had a meeting because a judge in Pakistan recently ruled that the Ahmadiyya have a right to practice their religion. And the Council of
Ooh.
Islamic Ideology, which is a government organization in Pakistan, they were enraged.
Hmm.
And so what they have recommended is that the decision should be reversed, and they said that the Ahmadis. Oh, and also even in the decision, it says that they should not be allowed to profess their faith outside their places of worship, but that means they can profess their faith inside their places of worship, you see. And
Hmm.
so the Council of Islamic Ideology says the latter part of paragraph 42 of the decision, which permits Ahmadis to profess or preach within their places of worship, should be reconsidered. They must not be allowed to profess or preach in any manner, even within their houses, community centers, or in places of worship. They must not be permitted to profess or preach openly inside their houses or otherwise, as their actions directly desecrate the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, Baba, Islam, the Quran, and the Sunnah. Not even in their houses can they
Hmm.
preach. So in Germany, you got this guy, and he's out there showing how the Jews have earned Allah's anger, and the Christians have gone astray, and he's teaching little school children this. And in
Hmm.
Pakistan, a minority group they're saying the Council of Islamic Ideology, a government organization, saying they can't even preach in their houses.
And it's weird when you were saying, hey, there's a chair there for us and so on. I was thinking, wouldn't it be interesting if some of these guys invited us over for a discussion on jihad? And then I thought, what? Imagine how that would actually look if, like, they invited you over there. You give a presentation on what jihad is, and they'd be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, he's completely correct. Yeah, yeah, good job, good job, good job.
Yep.
Outstanding, outstanding, 100% correct
Yep.
assessment of jihad, Mister Spencer."
Yeah, what we should do is go in disguise. You're very good at disguises.
Mhm.
We should go over as imams and explain jihad, explain the Quran. They'll all say that we have very high degree of knowledge of Islam, and then we reveal no, after we get out of the country, we reveal our identities.
I'm not really Robert Al-Muriki. I'm Robert Spencer.
That's it. But we'd really have to brush up because Khalid Tantawi, that there he is, an interesting looking individual. He is a lawmaker in Egypt, and he is enraged because there was just a Quran recitation competition, and some people made mistakes,
Mm,
and he wants them prosecuted. He
yeah.
wants the Association of Quran Reciters and Memorizers to introduce rules
Mhm.
against errors in recitation.
Yeah, and I'm saying it's not like, it's not like, because with all these different Qurans out there, it's easy to misrecite something, but so you don't want to, like, give them a death penalty or something, but public lashings for misquoting the Quran, yeah, probably want something like that.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because, if there were a Bible memorization contest that a church held or something, the people who lose are not going to get prosecuted or jailed. But this guy, Khalid Tantawi, he wants to see that happen in Egypt. You don't get the Quran right, then you're going to be facing the long arm of the law,
As you should.
as you should. But meanwhile, in Pakistan, we had a story of another gentleman named Ali Haider who was imprisoned for life last Thursday. Imprisoned for life, David, for desecrating the Quran.
Hmm.
That he apparently defiled copies of the Quran. He was accused of desecrating the Quran. The
Wait, so
prosecution,
he did something like this? He did something like that,
yeah, very like
and
that.
then they prosecuted him.
Yeah, life in
Oh,
prison.
life for that,
Yep,
for this. So you
for
do
that,
this, and so you do this, and then you go like that, and then there's life in prison.
life in prison.
Meanwhile, Western politicians are like, "Hey, it works so well over there. Why can't we have it here?"
Exactly. Yeah, eight. They had 8 witnesses that Ali Haider had desecrated the pages of the Quran, just like you just did, and so they called for conviction.
We've got way more witnesses
They
for what
said
I
that
just
yeah, we got probably a few
600,
hundred right now. Is that right?
637 witnesses right now.
Nice, and they're going to be more when people watch the video.
Hmm.
So probably about 20,000. And so Ali Haider is going to prison for life. But what's noteworthy is that there are 8 witnesses who says he did it, but the defense pointed out to no avail that nobody reported it to police on the day it happened. So all those 8 witnesses that supposedly saw it, they just went about their business and
Hmm.
didn't say a thing about it at the time.
Does not sound realistic. We see these mobs just jump into action instantly at the mere thought that someone has done something like this.
Indeed. And so I kind of think Ali Haider is innocent. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, he's never going to get a fair shake
Mm-mm, not
because
going to happen.
even if he were freed, even if he were to get out tomorrow, there'd be a mob ready to kill him.
Hmm.
The
And we
accusation is enough.
and yeah, and this also is something that goes back to the Muslim sources, that it's you basically have a license to kill if you simply can accuse someone of doing something like that. We got the story in Sunan Abu
Hmm.
Dawud where a man killed the mother of his own children. It was a slave girl, but she had fathered 2 kids by him. The guy stabs her to death. The blood runs all over one of her kids. Then he tosses the body, and then the Muslims gather around the next day, and they're like, "Ah, who killed this woman who's been brutally stabbed to death?" And the guy comes forward and says, Muhammad, she insulted you. Muhammad said, no punishment for this guy. This woman insulted me. I mean, keep in mind, he could have killed her for any reason. He could have killed her for the bad falafel or something like this, and just walk out there and say, she insulted you, Muhammad. So it's actually in the Muslim sources that this is a way to get away with murder. That guy got away with murder just by saying, "Oh, yeah," and she insulted you, Muhammad. And so it shouldn't be surprising that even to this day, you don't like someone, just gather a couple of your friends and say, "Oh yeah, we all saw him desecrate the Quran." Guy's lucky he got life in prison and not just murdered.
And pretty soon you're going to be able to do that in Sweden as well, because Sweden, you have the that one area I've already forgotten, Uddevalla, where you can get pork in the schools, and the Muslim students are enraged. But Sweden as a whole is going in the other direction. And the evidence of that is that this past week, Swedish prosecutors announced that they were going to put this man, Salwan Momika, and another one, Salwan Najem, on trial for desecrating the Quran. In Sweden, which supposedly is in favor of the freedom of speech and freedom of expression, it's no more the case. Now they are going to be prosecuted. They are not native Swedes, so they could be deported. Senior prosecutor Anna Hankio said both men are prosecuted for having on 4 occasions made statements and treated the Quran in a manner intended to express contempt for Muslims because of their faith. Now, David, that's just false. I know enough. I've read Salwan Momika's tweets.
Yeah, and look what they did. They made it about Muslims because they want to explain this as some sort of racism or something, even though guy's not Swedish, right? So they have to do that. So they can't make it that he's showing contempt for the ideas and for the ideology, which calls for his violent subjugation and the ideology calls for him to be executed for blasphemy and so on. And what's the position of Sweden? You just have to keep your mouth shut about it. If you have all these guys who want to kill you, shut your mouth. Under no circumstances do you express your contempt for that ideology. And I have to say, I don't want these guys getting deported because we know what that would mean. I am looking forward to these trials to actually expose what's going on. I want the entire world looking at Sweden going, you freaking lunatics, look at what you're doing. Look what they've done to you. And want that as an example for when we say, hey, do you know what Islam does? It actually will over time change your entire legal system to give Islam a privileged status in society. No, it doesn't do that, David. You're lying. Oh, really? Look at Sweden.
Yep. And remember, Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman of the United States, the husband of Vice President Kamala Harris, has promised that there will be soon legislation regarding Islamophobia and the criminalization of Islamophobia, not just in the UK, but also in the US.
Better lock me up now. I have to say, jail ain't nothing but brick and steel. I can't hold the dizzle.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can show me the ropes or whatever. I don't know how it works.
Don't worry. If you get locked up before I do, just go in there, tell them you know David Wood. You'll be fine.
Okay. All right. Interesting to note in just one last final thing real quick. Everybody always says, that the Taliban is an extreme version of Islam. It's not the real thing. But it's noteworthy that the Taliban hasn't gotten the memo. And the UN has been condemning them for their rules against women that we talked about last week, that women can't even speak outside the home and so on. And the Taliban has called upon the UN to, quote, refrain from criticisms that insult Islamic values. So the Taliban is accusing the UN of Islamophobia. And it's getting fun out there, ladies and gentlemen. But we have, I believe we have come to the end. David, off air, you got to get me your address so I can get you this book so that you can tear it to shreds. Not literally, though, because we need to talk about it. But that Battle of the Titans is coming up. And in the meantime, there will be more Jihad next week. There was a whole lot more Jihad this week, but I think I know people have sometimes said there should be a longer show, but I personally think, ladies and gentlemen, that an hour of Jihad every week is plenty. You want more, go to jihadwatch.org. There is, unfortunately, plenty more at jihadwatch.org and documentation of the stories that we've talked about tonight. So we'll be back maybe next week. Maybe not next week, actually. I'm on the road, but probably sometime soon after that, God willing. And until then, pray, hope, and don't worry.